Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City Mad Mouth, and I am glad to be joined by Rick Curti and George Eichorn. And while I bring this broadcast up, I want to make an announcement tonight that George Eichorn and Rick Curti will be permanent co-hosts on one of the sports exchanges that we're going to be doing. So, guys, you worked really well together before. I'm looking to try to build on the synergy that you two, as well as myself, have worked on as we try to find some momentum going into 2021. Glad to have you guys back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good to be
All
here.
right. I don't know how we're going to describe this broadcast. Some two words seem to really resonate in my mind. Is this going to be a rant fest? I know Rick Curti loves to rant all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really?
Plenty of rant about, too.
Yeah, 2020 that is. Okay, so what I'm going to do tonight, folks, okay, is we're going to talk about certain subjects, and then George and Rick are going to comment. And then when one or the other is done, I'm going to get my 2 cents worth in, and we're going to go through them all. All right, with that said, Rick Curti, COVID-19.
Horrible, terrible. Everyone's affected by this. Doesn't matter who you are, how rich, how famous. And this disease, this infection doesn't care who you are, don't care how rich you are. Thank God there's a vaccine coming. It's here, and it's going to get better. But right now, we just got to hunker down and be safe. But 2020 has just been an unforgettable year. It's been a horrible year, and we haven't seen anything like this since the Spanish flu of 1918. So I just tell people to mask up and be safe.
Yeah. And, I might add, too, that as far as the sports world, obviously it's minor in comparison, like Rick said, this devastating plague and pandemic, but it just turned the sports world upside down like we've never, ever seen. You'd have to go back to when things were canceled during the height of World War II, would have been the last time that sports world took a back seat. And but everything connected with sports, and we'll talk more about this because I know that in my pregame briefing with Scott and Rick, we have separate topics off of this same subject, COVID-19. But I agree with you, Rick, just devastation. And obviously over 300,000 Americans have died. And it's just incredible that we can't find a cure for this, although now we do know a vaccine is out there. Thank you to Pfizer and some other companies. So it's just been a terrible year.
Yeah, when I look at COVID-19, I'm going to take this a little personal here, okay? And this goes back to personal with my recent trip back home to Metro Detroit. I have a mother, obviously, who recently passed away November 20th, 2020. And because of COVID-19, I was limited to FaceTime. And I didn't have a chance to see the woman until she had about a week left, 6 days left. And I can tell you already how many times that my father talked about my brother being there 300 times. Okay, Dad, he was. Didn't hurt that he lived in the area. But for me, Michigan, as you all know, George, Governor Gretchen Whitmer made it difficult for anybody to come to the state of Michigan because you had to quarantine for a period of time. Candy doesn't have that kind of time to quarantine, let alone the fact I can't be away here near 14 and then not being able to go to restaurants. So it was virtually impossible for me to do it. Now, thankfully, I was able to get there for the very, very end to see her, but that's not the point, okay? This virus is spreading like wildfires. It really is. And and I know a lot of people are in the situation I'm in. You can't afford to take any chances traveling because even if I had gotten there and contracted the virus, I would have put 2 people, that are senior citizens at tremendous risk, and I have even taken the chance to even go up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of people are affected by COVID-19 because they weren't able to see relatives that were obviously in terminal health. And, COVID-19 is a mess anyways in its own right. But when you add a personal dimension to it and not being able to travel freely like you want to, you're watching everything you do like you do. I know that when we went to Detroit, thankfully I had a good room over at the extended stay. George obviously saw that was a pretty nice place that we had for a couple of weeks.
Yes.
And I was able to social distance adequately there. but we were limited to carryouts is what we were, to take them back to the hotel room. And thankfully we had facilities and I was able to see my mom. The COVID-19 turned this whole world upside down, not only domestically, but as well as worldwide. And I feel very bad in a sense because the leadership we had in place did not take it upon the signals you had to be proactive instead of reactive, and the rest is history.
Yep. Yeah, like, there was nobody stepped up, and people politicized this, and which was wrong. And now you have people who don't want to wear masks. Do people want to wear masks? And then you got bars that are still crowded and putting people's lives at risk. And you're seeing people who are being selfish and thinking only of themselves. And it's just been, it's really, not only has it hurt us economically, and not only people have died, but it's really kind of been like separated our country. It seems like we're just so, right now we're just completely separate from each other. And instead of just talking to each other, we have to argue. And that's the sad thing about all this.
So, George, how would you define the job that Governor Gretchen Whitmer has done in the state of Michigan in handling the pandemic?
Well, it's pretty much the majority speaks and give her high marks. But the minority is very vocal and very upset. The minority includes people like restaurateurs and people that love to go to sporting events and people that love to go out to bars. Michigan is a heavy state for eating out and heavy state for drinking out on Thursday nights and Friday nights and Saturday nights. So, but the recent polls show that about over 60% say she did the right thing, but the 40% is very angry with her. There have been petition drives to get rid of her, to recall her. There was a crazy group of men that are accused of this plot to kidnap her and put her on trial and stupid things like that. But she has the majority of the backing of the people, Scott. It's just the fact that, like I said, it's unfortunate that the school children can't go to school, and my own granddaughters are affected by that. And it is very difficult for people that are used to a normal life and a normal social life, of course, that are affected by that. But like I said, the recent poll I saw, she's got 60% plus that favored her decisions.
And I will say this, when I come back to Michigan, even though I wasn't there as often as my brother was because he lived in the area, I wasn't able to see him back in Michigan because he had COVID-19 and he barely made it to the funeral. But I will tell you right now, I will take the 5-6 days I was with my mom all day long anyways, over being there over a long period of time, because at least I was there at the very end when it really mattered the most.
Yes, very true. Very true.
So, I mean, do I wish I could have gone out to restaurants? Yeah. Was I happy with the fact that we planned the trip well, that we were battle tested and done a lot of things? Yeah. As far as Governor Ron DeSantis is concerned in Florida, he's in a touristy state. He has no choice but to keep everything open, whether we like it or not. But then you have to depend on following all the guidelines, protocols, matching up, and common sense and all that, more so in the state of Florida. But again, when you often wonder, compare Florida versus Michigan, Florida has a lot more to lose than Michigan because of the tourist industry that you have, the restaurants, right. Where Michigan, a way of life is getting out to the bars, going out to restaurants. Florida is $1 billion tourist industry that you can't shut things down for too long a period of time. I think Governor Ron DeSantis is in a catch-22. You're darned if you do, darned if you don't.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
I'm going to have to make the call. All right, let's go on to the sporting world. You got Los Angeles Lakers winning the NBA championship, George.
Well, LeBron James did it again, didn't he? The NBA went into a bubble and format that worked out very well, and the Lakers emerged as the champions, albeit really late in the game. Obviously, everything was delayed because of COVID. Good teamwork. LeBron, say what you want, and people call him different things, and he's not a ball hog. He's a team player, and I think the Lakers, they found the right balance, the right mix of veterans and younger players on that team, and I give them kudos and credits. The Lakers won the title, and I'm don't you think, Rick, that they did a nice job?
He sure did. I didn't think the NBA would have a season. I thought it's canceled. It's done. They did a great job with keeping people in the bubble. And people just hate LeBron James. No matter what he does, what he says, he can win a title, and they're always going to criticize him. And I mean, it's just the guy's one of the greatest superstars ever. And I think when he's retired and we get older, I think these idiots that want to call him out are going to look back and say, he really was a great basketball player. But right now, all the people want to hate him, and I just think it's just jealousy. The guy's a multi-billionaire. He's successful. He's won 4 championships with 3 different teams now. I mean, he does movies. I mean, he's successful, and I just think people just want to hate on him just pretty much because they're jealous. That's my opinion on it.
Well, I got a couple points on this. First of all, Anthony Davis, happy for him, wins a championship with LA.
Yeah.
But what I like about that even more so is the New Orleans Pelicans were able to come up with a win-win situation. They got a pretty good return for Davis, is what they did. And the Lakers obviously signed him. But here's the guy that I'm happier the most out of anybody. How about Frank Vogel, coach? He's a championship caliber coach. He really is. A lot of people thought he was just holding down the fort for Jason Kidd. Guess what? Frank can coach.
Sure can. Did a great job with it. Did a great job when he was at Indiana.
Well, exactly. Now he has a championship to show for it in L.A. Frank Vogel will have a championship ring in Los Angeles Lakers history among some of the best out there.
Yep. I agree. He's a great coach.
I'm happy for LeBron James. To be able to win a title in 3 different places is special. To do it with the Cavaliers is incredible by itself because they've only had one.
Mm-hmm.
Miami, I don't know if you cheapen the effect of having to join a couple of guys down there to get it off, but he did nonetheless win a couple. But what he did in L.A. was pretty good, and he did it under tough circumstances with that bubble out in Orlando.
Yep.
But more power to Frank Vogel. And Jeannie Buss did a fine job when everybody was against her, having to live in the shadows of her father, Dr. Jerry Buss. She finally got one by herself. So, and Rob did a pretty good
best thing she did was firing her brother.
Oh, yeah. No, that's true. No.
I remember that when she said she had to fire her brother. I'm like, well, she got to do what she got to do. And her brother's not doing a good job, so she had to fire him.
Yeah.
That was the best thing she did.
How'd it work out? Pretty well. All right. Let's go to the National Hockey League, Tampa Bay Lightning.
Well, again, you got a situation where it strikes home to me that Steve Yzerman, the now general manager of the Detroit Red Wings, helped build and mold that team down in Tampa. Unfortunately for Stevie, he left early, but he knew that. He was going to back home to where the fans loved him in Detroit and admired him. And I'm happy for Tampa Bay. I mean, they're a guy named William Davidson won a title down there with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and a president named Tom Wilson at the time. 2 guys from Detroit were owners and chief executive of that team, as you remember, Scott and Rick. And so Tampa Bay, they've been waiting a long time to taste on the Stanley Cup. And again, you talk about teamwork, you talk about great players, but guys that knew their role. And again, another bubble situation. Gary Bettman in the NHL did a nice job with those 2 hub cities of Edmonton and Toronto. And again, it was a very competitive round, multiple rounds, of the playoffs. So Tampa Bay Lightning, they deserve it. What do you think, guys?
All right.
I think Tampa Bay did a great job. Like I said, just like the NBA, a very difficult situation with the bubble, but they did it, and, you got all these multiple teams from other states, and it's just, it could have been a disaster, but they did a great job. And kudos to Tampa Bay. They had the Rays in the World Series. Everybody all hyped up with Tom Brady going to the Buccaneers, and now you got the Lightning win the Stanley Cup. So I'm happy for Tampa Bay. It's really good to see them succeed, especially with the Rays going to the World Series and all. And now they're gonna get the Raptors there for one season. The Tampa Bay, the Toronto Raptors are going to be in Tampa Bay this NBA season. So we'll see what happens with them and their championship team. So maybe Tampa Bay will get another championship there.
Well, I'll say this. I'm happy that people in Detroit can realize that Steve Yzerman built the nucleus of that championship in Tampa. But let's not forget that Steve Yzerman has had some good success internationally as well for Team Canada and knows how to build franchises. But the one name that should be synonymously brought up with the Tampa Bay Lightning is a guy George and I are all too familiar with. Phil Esposito helped bring hockey to the Tampa Bay area. And for a while, it was ugly in Tampa, but they had success before, and then they recreated it again. So Phil Esposito, in my opinion, is the father of hockey in Tampa. And I can remember many times when I've gone to that arena, you had a lot of Red Wings fans, but now you don't see as many as you used to because Tampa has been able to create the local following that many people didn't think you could do in the South, for sure.
Yeah,
so
very, very true.
Phil Esposito and obviously Steve Yzerman, I expect him to be able to duplicate that success in Detroit, but let's preach the word patience because that's what it's going to take every bit of.
Oh, yeah.
Right, let's go to Rick Curti's hometown, the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Hey, what about that? I'll tell you what, talk about another franchise. Hey, Rick, that's been waiting a long time to taste from the bubbly.
Yeah, I've been saying that if they don't win the World Series, they're going to be the Buffalo Bills of Major League Baseball, and they had that was a must win. They had to win it. Dave Roberts, to me, his job was on the line, and I've been screaming and hollering that he needs to go away, and we need to get Mike Scioscia and everything, and he'll be staying there a while, and I'm glad he got that monkey off his back. I'm happy for Kershaw to get that monkey off his back. He's been labeled a choker. I've been labeling him a choker, and he stepped up and won a World Series. So I'm happy for Los Angeles, but I'm really happy for Clayton Kershaw to get that monkey off his back and get a World Series, and to do in a difficult situation with COVID-19 again. Big question mark if Major League Baseball is coming back, and to see how they were going to do it. And they did a really nice job. And so I'm very happy for the Dodgers, and I'm happy for Kershaw.
Yeah, I am too. I think the Dodgers have been waiting a long time. We'll never forget that famous call by Vin Scully when Kurt Gibson wobbly pinch hit and hit that home run. And the last time they won the World Series, the Dodgers. And, not to dismiss that, but I was getting a little bit tired of seeing that same replay. So you're right. Now we got some new highlights. We got some new blood, Dave Roberts. And I agree with you. I remember meeting Kershaw one time in Detroit at the World Series when we hosted it against San Francisco. And they brought Clayton in to give him one of the awards. It wasn't the Cy Young Award, but I think it was like Man of the Year Award or something like that. And they had a little press conference with him. And I was just impressed. First time I ever saw him. I'd never met him before because the Dodgers rarely would come to Detroit to play. And I echo your sentiments, Rick, exactly. I'm so happy for him and so many other guys on that team that deserve that world championship. And Scott, I know you've had a personal relationship with Tommy Lasorda. Our prayers go out to Tommy right now as he's had some tough health issues. But boy, oh boy, Scott, he must have been really happy to see his Dodgers win.
No question about it. I want to make one other point, too, though, that before everything got shut down in the spring, Candy and I had a chance to see Kershaw play against the Milwaukee Brewers over at Camelback Ranch. So it's neat to be able to see Kershaw pitch while we're in Arizona. And then back to your point, George, it was good to see Tom Lasorda and Vin Scully be alive to see this championship. No question about it. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could have met Vin Scully. Tried a couple times, but he never worked out where he never made it to Vero Beach. I missed him by about a week. And I'm a member of Southern California Sports Broadcasters and never made it there. But he's certainly narrating it remotely, and they pre-recorded it. But Vin Scully is the greatest announcer of all time. And I have to tell you, I do have loyalties to Tom Lasorda because back when I started out as a young journalist, Tommy Lasorda was my first big interview, and he's given me a lot of thrills. And I have one of his key photos in my office that I'm very proud of, that he was one of the first people to help me get started. So I was glad to see Vinny as well as was sort of alive. And I'm happy that Dave Roberts got the monkey off his back. He deserved
Yeah.
it. He went through a lot to get to that championship. But the Los Angeles Dodgers in general, they're just a class organization all from top to bottom. They really are.
They are.
I don't care whether they won it in '88 or whether they won it in '81 when you had a strike-shortened season, or whether you won it there. Winning a World Series is still tough to do because the pressure that's involved in winning the Fall Classic is just unbelievable, and you got to be performing at your best in order to pull it off. All right, let's go to the National Football League. Kansas City Chiefs, my goodness. There's certainly no Super Bowl hangover so far, but let's focus on the fact that the Chiefs won the Super Bowl earlier. All right, Rick, lead it off.
Well, Andy Reid, another guy like Dave Roberts, had that monkey on his back, couldn't win in Philadelphia, came close a couple times, and a lot of people said Andy Reid, I don't know if he could win a Super Bowl, and he proved everybody wrong. He always had some issues in the playoffs with time management or something. But he got that monkey off his back, and no Super Bowl hangover for the Chiefs. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, to me, is running away with the MVP right now. They look sensational. The two best teams right now, even though the Steelers are struggling right now, I think it's Kansas City and the Steelers. And Kansas City is the best team right now. Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback right now. They're offensive juggernaut. They're fantastic. And right now, I think Kansas City is going to repeat as Super Bowl champion. So they're doing well. And for a team that hadn't won a Super Bowl and made history by being in the first Super Bowl, they've done a really great job. And Patrick Mahomes is the real deal. He's just an amazing athlete.
Yeah, he is. He's a very good quarterback. He just has so much going for him right now. Just a tremendous arm, tremendous talent. Boy, I go back to those days, like you mentioned, Rick, you alluded to the early Super Bowls, when Lamar Hunt was the owner of the team and Hank Stram was the head coach, and talk about another city that's been waiting a long, long time to finally win a championship. My hats are off to Kansas City. Just tremendous season. And of course, all of that was pre-COVID. Remember, this was,
true.
Yeah.
Before we got hit really hard with this early last February when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And of course, getting there, you had to get by a guy named Tom Brady in New England, and they blew by him and his team. And, but Patrick Mahomes, he's a great athlete, a superstar, having another great year this year. But you forgot one team, my friend, and don't forget the Green Bay Packers and the tremendous job Aaron Rodgers has done this year. Green Bay is going to be the thick of it right off the get-go. And it's going to be an interesting vote, I think, between Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers for the MVP this year. But, Kansas City, great story. I was rooting for him. I was pulling for him. Like I said, I like the underdog role. Scott mentioned it's been since '88 for the Dodgers, and now Kansas City's been forever and a day since they won anything. So they did a great job, don't you think, Scott?
No question about it. In fact, when you talk about Andy Reid, he knows how to pick quarterbacks. Donovan McNabb worked out pretty well for Philadelphia, even though they didn't really particularly like him. And Patrick Mahomes worked out pretty well. Got a year out of Alex Smith a little bit. Decided to move Patrick Mahomes, worked out real well. But tell you what, though, if there's a sleeper that I think could potentially knock off Kansas City, don't sleep on the Buffalo Bills either. Josh Allen's a pretty good player. And when I saw what they did to the Steelers early in the week, and I thought they looked pretty good. So, but we'll keep the focus on Kansas City. The rabid fans out there. I've been to a game at Arrowhead. Obviously, didn't have any this year. Andy Reid can definitely – he's always been a fine coach. Comes from the Green Bay Packer coaching tree anyways under Mike Holmgren. So, Andy Reid's done a fine job, and the Kansas City fan base is unbelievable. So, more power to the Chiefs. That's a heck of an organization there. All right, let's talk about March Madness. Well, guess what? There wasn't any.
Nope.
Yeah, and for me, it's still hard to believe. But again, it was the early onset of COVID-19 as far as sports goes, and I think the hands of the NCAA were tied. Obviously, CBS and the broadcast partners, Turner and the rest of them, were extremely upset that the NCAA pulled the plug on the big dance, or the March Madness, as we call it. But at that time, there was really no choice. And And to bring in all those teams into one city was, and I know they've talked about this possibly in 2021, but it's going to be very difficult if you would try to house everybody in one big city, even if it is a big city like Indianapolis or Orlando, like the NBA did. But I missed it. Let's be honest. We missed it. I mean, there's nothing like March Madness, college basketball, and the office pools and all that fun stuff we do with each other and with our friends and with our office coworkers, etc. We missed all that, and it's just one and done, as you guys know. And unfortunately, it was none and done.
Yeah, it was sad. I missed the brackets. Everyone getting their brackets ready, and who do you have in your bracket, and what team do you have here, what team you have there, and I missed the presidential when the presidents would do their own bracket and all that stuff. So that's what I missed, and it was just weird not having it because it's such a huge festivity. People love it, and you have such memorable, games. I still remember when Christian Laettner that shot against Kentucky, and it's just so many. Jim Valvano winning the championship, and it's just historic. And to not have it this year and was sad, but at the same time you understood because there was just no way they were going to do it. There's just, it was just they had to do it. They had to pull a plug and reset and have it next season. And it's going to be difficult to have it next season, but they're going to have to. So we'll see what happens. But it was very, very sad to not see March Madness, and I do miss seeing people fill out their brackets. That was just that's like a tradition you see.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about March Madness is obviously everything began to shut down in March.
Yeah.
Too early in the game. Had no choice. Once the NBA made their first decision to stop, the dominoes dropped. Now, again, later on, and we're going to address this later in the broadcast, okay, would there be a bubble concept? Probably. But right now, you're early in the game. You have no choice but to shut it down. Period. Nobody knew anything about the virus. Not that we know much more now, except it's caused chaos. But
yeah,
it is what it is. March Madness. Yeah, March Madness definitely was March Madness. We didn't know anything.
Yeah, very true, Scott.
So you had to start, and unfortunately, they were one of the first ones, to pull the plug. And let me tell you, I agree with everything both of you said, but March Madness was March Madness figuratively. And I mentioned the word figuratively because we didn't know a darn thing about COVID-19. And that's why it all went down. So, All right. Since I segued into chaos, we'll talk about college football chaos. And Rick Curti, you're going to lead off on this one because you said they shouldn't have played anyways.
Yeah, I think people are, you have teams like Ohio State who play like a handful of games, and people are saying, they shouldn't be in the, in ranked because they haven't played as many games. But at the same time, I can't penalize a team for not playing a lot of games because they were canceled because of a pandemic. So, I saw Dabo Swinney's comments, and I understand what he says, but at the same time, I can't punish a team for having their games canceled because of this horrible century pandemic. So it's just a tough situation. And I know a lot of the teams are having some fans there. I still can't believe Notre Dame when all those fans rushed into the field. That was just crazy to me. But they're doing what they can. But a lot of games are being canceled. I know UNC Charlotte, they've had a lot of their games canceled, and so it's just been. But they're just plugging along, doing the best they can do. But it's like I said, it's tough. But it's good to see college football. But it's just under these tough circumstances. But I think to me, what's the difficult thing is that with Ohio State, it's just to me, it's like I can see both sides, but at the same time, I cannot punish Ohio State because their games are getting canceled because of a pandemic.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, here at Michigan, of course, the Wolverines have lost a third game. It was announced today. They will not be playing Iowa this Saturday night on national television. So it's affected the Michigan Wolverines. Of course, it's been a horrible year for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines to begin with. but he lost games to Maryland, Ohio State, and now Iowa on the schedule. So, yeah, it's been very difficult. It's not fair. It's not fair that some teams are playing more games than others, and some teams are not. And bowl games have been canceled that normally are played between Christmas and New Year's. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them. And it's a sign of the times. Like you said. I mean, there's the COVID, and there's student athletes, and there's protocols that are not being followed on some of these campuses, some of these universities, and obviously affecting, like I said, Michigan right here in my own backyard. Ann Arbor is a hot spot now for COVID, and but up the road, East Lansing, Michigan State hasn't lost a single day to practice. So you got here in my own state, you got teams that are doing good as far as COVID restrictions, and it's funny because Michigan State was always guys called the party school, more parties in Michigan State than in Ann Arbor. But, I don't know if I ever bought into that anyways, because college kids are college kids,
right,
no matter where they are. But getting back to the football scene, it's going to be an asterisk for me. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be Notre Dame. I don't know if it's going to be Clemson or Ohio State. We don't know who's going to win it all. I mean, Texas A&M's making a case for themselves, other teams. But all I'm saying is that it'll still be fun, though. Trust me, it'll be fun. You talk about missing March Madness. We are not going to miss New Year's Day in the bowl games this year. We hope. It's not certain yet, but there is hope. And hats off to last year's winner too, which again was part of 2020 when LSU was the national champion. Remember, guys, back in January. So we got to say hats off to them. Scott, you're a big college football guy, I know. Wisconsin is another school that's lost a lot of games to football as well this year.
Yeah, here's what I want to say about this. Number one, what's so sad about the amount of games is there were so many schools that got it right and did it right, and they were victimized and penalized because of circumstances that occurred on the other side.
Yeah.
That's the toughest part of this whole thing, is they were victimized by other teams that didn't get it right on the other side. I say that twice because I'm emphasizing it. That's my version of a highlighter. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the LSU National Championship. They won a national championship. They did it with Joe Burrow. And believe it or not, they upset my Florida Gators over the weekend because that's a game the Gators weren't really supposed to be playing, but they ended up making the game up. And the Gators, unfortunately, were upset by LSU and a young quarterback. So hats off to LSU. And how many players got drafted on NFL rosters, another story. But the bottom line is I just feel bad. Again, I'll say it for the third time, all the teams that got it right were victimized. I don't care about Dabo Swinney. He don't mean nothing to me. He really does. But yes, I mean, and we'll get into asterisks in a moment. But the fact of the matter is you have so many different conferences that aren't on the same page, playing a different amount of games. So anybody that has to determine this Final Four, to me, needs a Rubik's Cube to figure this thing out, because that's exactly what you need.
Yeah, true.
One's playing 5, the other one's playing 7, the other one's playing 8. Go figure. You're going to do that, you might as well flip a coin.
Yeah.
Right? Go back to the old computer voting totals, right, George, back in the day when nobody can decide who the national champion is.
That's right.
Yeah.
When they did stuff using the computer. Exactly.
Yeah. But, I mean, Ed Orgeron obviously will bounce back next year. But, again, I preface the uneven amount of games. Some teams got it right, some didn't. As a result, college football chaos 2020.
Yep, for sure. Absolutely.
NFL, let's go to NFL outbreaks. I nearly didn't make it to the Lions-Jacksonville game. That was a last-minute decision to play that game because the Lions and the Jaguars, that game was close, but they ended up playing the game out in October. But the NFL has had a lot of different outbreaks. Unfortunately, the Pittsburgh Steelers were affected by those outbreaks, playing 3 games in about 12 days. And ultimately, I didn't think that Pittsburgh would go undefeated all year because they had a tough schedule. I was so kind of surprised Washington snuck up on them, but I'm not surprised that Buffalo did. I don't think the Buffalo Bills sneak up on anybody. But let's talk about the NFL outbreaks in general. You're talking about the different games being rescheduled, the bye weeks being altered. You talk about an outright mess. The NFL outbreaks is definitely it. Who wants to lead off with that one?
Well, I'll take a first stab at it. And Scott, you're absolutely right. I mean, who would have thought? We had Monday Night Football, and then we got Wednesday afternoon football. We got NBC doing a game at a time that they never do, on a day they never do. We got Fox doing a national broadcast ahead of the ESPN Monday Night Football game. So you talk about a topsy-turvy season, and you're absolutely right. The Pittsburgh Steelers are right in the middle of this mess. And I give them credit, and maybe it's caught up with them. Like you said, so many games in the last few weeks that they've had these couple of losses. But football has really tried to dodge the bullet, if you will. The NFL has, I mean. And there's been a lot of COVID stuff going on, as we know, games postponed, games delayed. But somehow they've managed to survive and managed to get most of this stuff done, even if it have been delayed a few days in some cases or more. But no, they're again, you know, you got Cam Newton, you know, you had some big guys that got tested. Matthew Stafford had 2 tests, but they were both, what do they say, positive, negative?
Right.
Yeah.
False positive.
Right.
False positive. Thank you. False positive, Rick. So, I mean, you know, in Detroit here, you know, Stafford was almost lost to the Lions. But that being said, Rick, you've said this all along on your shows with Scott about how this has affected pro football this year.
Yeah, it's been a mess, you know. I mean, you have some places that are playing in empty stadiums, and you got some with some fans there, and you know, it's just, you know, I tip my hat off to them doing the best they can do, but they've had so many outbreaks. The Ravens had outbreaks. Look at the Broncos; they had no quarterback.
Yeah,
because these 3 guys didn't want to social distance. They want to wear masks. You know, and that's what's going on, is that people are just not. I mean, how many? I think Sean Payton's been fined for not wearing a mask and social distancing, and he had COVID. You would think he'd get it. Gruden, the Raiders have just been abysmal with their social distancing. They got fined $500,000 and had draft picks taken away because they kept violating it. You know, and you just got people that are just not taking this seriously. So, you know, and I'm sure people are out there partying and doing things they shouldn't be doing and things like that. So, you know, they're doing the best they can do, but, you know, you got people that are just not following protocol. And then, unfortunately, you got the teams that are following protocol, but then they get their games canceled because the other teams are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So it's just been a difficult situation, but, you know, I tip my hat off to them to have a season, but it's just every day you hear somebody getting COVID, you know, it's either Cam Newton, you know, or Lamar Jackson, or, you know, and then you get Stafford with a false positive and all that stuff. And, you know, some people are testing positive and the next day they test negative, and it's been a mess.
Well, let's not forget the fact that football, you're not going to social distance, or you might as well play flag football if that's the case, because everybody's on top of each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't social distance playing football, college, high school, pros, whatever. Okay, you don't social distance when hand on hand, glove on glove, sweat on sweat. Plus, it's hard to wear a mask when you have a helmet on. Pretty hard to do that. But George, you know, you talked about primetime makeup football. If there's one thing that probably could come out of this, though, it makes me kind of wonder. I'm wondering whether the NFL, you know, we talk about experimenting with different things during a crazy year, where they've expanded the practice squads to have like even veterans on them, so you have extra players. They've done that. I don't know whether that'll be, although you never know, that could happen next year too, depending on what goes on next year. But you've expanded the practice squad, and now you have more primetime games on different nights. I'm wondering whether or not this could be the beginning of more primetime contests during the week if they're able to balance the schedule, because the NFL is going to look for ways to try to make up some of that money that they lost and be able to have more primetime games. I wonder if anything positive could come out of it. You might see more primetime games, because that's an interesting thing that accidentally played itself out during the course of this crazy year.
Yeah, you're right, Scott. I mean, you know, they did play on some different days, and obviously it'll be interesting to see. I know that, you know, Friday has always been sacred because that's high school football day. Saturday has been sacred because of college football until late in the year, December, when the NFL has a couple of doubleheaders on Saturdays after college football season is over, but the Bulls are kind of competing with NFL on those Saturdays too. But I don't think so. I don't think you're going to get into the Tuesdays and the Wednesdays and that. I mean, they they spent a lot of money and outlaid a lot of rights fees to get the Thursday thing going. And now that's a ritual, the Thursday night football plus the Monday night plus the Sunday night. I'm hoping not. I think you sometimes reach a point of oversaturation too. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't be considered, but I don't think it'll be something that they'll probably latch onto. And plus, don't forget, you got a lot of money tied up with evening network programming, with the shows that are on, and now they're available on both Fox and ABC, ESPN, Netflix has their own, HBO has their own channel. Evening entertainment, I don't know if people will want football on like Tuesday and Wednesday and, Friday nights or stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. I don't. I think it worked this year because people accepted it because of the COVID situation.
But meanwhile, you're talking about Tuesday night football, though. You're talking about some of the college conferences like the MAC and some of the other ones are seeing football on Tuesday or Wednesday. Don't you think that they might slide an NFL game in once in a while to try to get that extra revenue at night occasionally? I mean, you're going to see football on Tuesday whether you like it or not. I don't know whether the Sun Belt, the MAC, Conference USA, or whatever it may be. But it's not like we haven't seen football in prime time. Obviously, this year you have unprecedented circumstances. I get that. But let's face the reality, the NFL's taking a hit. And the TV networks, if you smell an opportunity, Rick, and I'm sure you can agree with that, right? If you smell an opportunity for a money grab, I wouldn't discount it, would you, Rick?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, they're already losing billions of dollars anyway.
Right.
This year, it's not about how much money are we going to make. It's about how much money are we not going to lose. And if there's an opportunity to have a game like on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or even a Friday, and they're going to take that opportunity because they're not going to lose out on the money.
Okay, very good point. All right, let's go back to the MLB outbreaks. And this one's very interesting because Rick Curti, obviously my co-host on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk, and you didn't want to, and I thought when the MLB outbreaks started taking place, we were wondering whether the season would be canceled, and there were so many things between how many games you'd have with Commissioner Manfred until they finally decided to do 60, zillions of double headers, and the season was so upside down. But I'm going to let you lead off with this one, Rick. Give me your thoughts about the MLB outbreaks.
Well, I mean, it's been crazy, like every other sport, all these outbreaks going on. We had a very unusual season. I was always like, are we going to have baseball? Are we going to have a World Series? And, I tip my hat off to them that they did have a season, and right now they're trying to figure out when to start the season. They're, trying to see what they can do about it, like when they're going to start it. So, they got their hands full again, because we don't know when this thing's going to end and when people are going to get these vaccines, and when we can bring fans back, it's the thing. So, again, it's a tough situation, that they don't want to lose out in, Major League Baseball lost billions of dollars and they don't want to lose billions of dollars again because, they'll go, a lot of people go out of business, lose jobs. So they got their hands full right now. So we'll see what happens, but to me, it's just a day-to-day thing. And, everything's up in the air.
Well, yeah, and you hit it on the head. It's the Major League Baseball has affected so many people. I mean, the minor league system, it's incredible how many cities, small cities, rely on Major League Baseball to be their, their feeder. Those are the feeder teams, as we're saying, in the farm system, and all of that was shut down. It's just incredible what had happened, and yeah, you're right, Rick. I mean, the owners have lost billions of dollars. When you added everything up, it's been incredibly frustrating. Employees, good staff, loyal customers. I mean, loyal employees laid off from the teams. It's just been really, really ugly for baseball, especially because there's so many people affected in baseball on the farm systems and through the major league teams as well. I agree with you. I think they did the best they could. Manfred did the best they could. I didn't like the way it was delayed and they waffled so much on it when they were going to start this year. But again, is because of taking the extra precautions. I mean, the guidelines put out by Manfred and MLB and agreed by Tony Clark and the Players Association were exhaustive. Their binder was several inches thick. They had every team to follow. Not everybody followed it, but I give hats off. And like we talked about earlier, the LA Dodgers, of course, survived it all and won the championship. But baseball is the heart of America, and all those people affected. It was really sad as far as losing wages, losing jobs, and wealthy owners. Yeah, they lost money too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think being in South Florida like I am, everybody laughed at the Miami Marlins because they were the first one that had to deal with an outbreak. Now all of a sudden we got a team here for the New York Yankees. You're not getting laughed at. If you're the Miami Marlins, you're getting laughed at. Then all of a sudden the St. Louis Cardinals had an outbreak. Then all of a sudden the beat goes on. And now you got guys throwing balls into mattresses, and you name every little knick-knack, paddywhack that you can come with to stay additionally able to do what you have to do. So, that was just unreal. Some of the things I'm sitting in with these Miami calls, I couldn't believe half the things I was hearing. I see Don Mattingly doing everything he can to do everything that he possibly could to try to keep the step stable, and it's just too surreal. But when we panicked a little bit about those outbreaks between the Marlins first and the Cardinals and other teams would subsequently have them, I definitely thought that the season was in jeopardy, and nobody really thought it should happen in the first place. But they managed to work through it. They really did. The Marlins, and when you think about when you get past the MLB outbreaks, a lot of teams snap playoff droughts as a result. And you talk about baseball maintaining and keeping the interest among cities that were non-contenders for a long, long time.
Yeah.
That's one thing that positively came out of it. But, those outbreaks, you're right, affected the unemployment. Teams starting to lay off staff members. So there's no question that domino effect of unemployment versus the outbreak certainly trickled down all the way through everything, which as a result, like you guys have talked about, led to numerous financial losses and the contraction of a lot of minor league teams. But I think the minor league teams being contracted, the 40 of them, this was in the works for a while. I don't think this was a result of the pandemic. I think that they had felt that they had saturated enough, and some of these cities that got ruled out, will be absorbed up in other leagues. George, you've got a league up in Oakland County, I think, up in the Rochester Hills, a pro league that produces a lot of prospects. So there's going to be other cities that come forward, but just not in the manner for which we're usually seeing the minor leagues as they once were.
Right, exactly. And you're right, Scott. There's a lot of ripple effect that happened in the minor league system, and the league you're referring to, our friend Andy Appleby created in Utica, Michigan, and got 4 teams playing there, and he's got plans to double that in the next several years. Quite a man, Andy. Built a beautiful stadium in Utica, and unfortunately, the Detroit Tigers want nothing to do with it. They don't want to scout the games. They don't want to have anything to say about it. But excuse me, last I checked, Andy's got a hell of a product there. And like you said, a lot of his kids have been drafted and signed by major league teams. Even if the Tigers aren't doing any of the signing, there's a lot of clubs that are looking at those kids at that level. And you're right, Scott, it was in the works for a long time. Let's not kid ourselves. The consolidation of Major League Baseball and the oversaturation probably of the minor leagues was there for a while. So it was a problem they had to attack. And unfortunately, it coincided with COVID-19 this year in that wonderful year of 2020.
Well, let me tell you, the Tigers will eventually get on board when they see how many more players come out of it. Sometimes it takes a little while for teams to believe that it's a good system. We had the independent league out in St. Paul, Minnesota, and lots of independent leagues forming throughout the country, even though you don't have specific franchises in some places. Let me tell you, they always say if you build it, they will come. If there's talent, they'll find it. So I think that goes hand in hand for sure. So I think, again, we talk about the common words, Rick, domino effect. Now, let's talk about the MLB draft. Many years you had, 40 rounds? Now, and then some guys choose to come back some. Now I think because of everything that's gone on with the whole structure, if you only have 5 to 7 rounds, teams are going to get those top prospects signed, and then the other one, then you'll have different ways with undrafted free agents. So I think it'll probably benefits the draft because of the fact that they scaled the draft down. Now, do I think that the draft will probably get up to 10, 15, 20 players versus 40? TBD, but I'm assuming that it will. Rick, what are your thoughts on that? Since obviously you're in an area in North Carolina where you have a Gastonia professional franchise that's obviously set to play ball pretty soon. And we all know that the Carolinas are certainly known for being an extensive professional baseball area where you have if I understand, Rick, then Charlotte Knights are the Chicago White Sox affiliate, right?
Right.
So there's nobody better to comment on the minor leagues of professional baseball than you, Rick, since you have Gastonia connection as well as Charlotte. Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, it's been hard because MILB has been canceled this season. The Atlantic League of Professional Baseball was canceled. Some of the Atlantic League, they lost a couple of teams to they're like the Somerset Patriots are going to be part of the minor league system now of the Yankees. So it's just like I said, it's been difficult, and just got to keep plugging in and see how it goes, and hopefully we'll rebound from this. It will take a while, but we'll rebound. But right now things are just very, very unorthodox right now. Big question mark with what's going to be happening. But I feel bad for all these small little places like Gastonia or a High Point or, smaller cities that are really going to be affected by it's their livelihood, and when they don't have any baseball, it hurts their economy. It hurts jobs. It hurts people. People want to get out. People are tired of being stuck in their house all the time and want to go out. That's the first thing I'm going to do is when we get back to normal, quote unquote, I want to go to a baseball game because I miss going to a baseball game and miss being around all the people and just strike up conversation. So those are the ones that are going to suffer. The small little teams, a small little city like a Gastonia that's been, trying to find something to get their economy going, and to me, it's what they're doing is great, and then all of a sudden COVID happens, but they're plugging along. The stadium's almost built, and they're going to be getting a name soon, and it's going to happen, but it's just under difficult situations and open up in April 2021, and hopefully by that time we'll get sort of back to normal, see what happens. But right now everything's a big question mark.
All right, let's talk about bubble concept, okay? First of all, it was fantastic with the National Hockey League. Boy, that was a masterminded approach, keeping all those games up in Canada. I knew that bubble concept in the NHL was going to work, and boy, did it work really well. We'll talk about leagues one at a time. George, okay?
Well, it worked for the NHL, but again, it was a big blow to the United States of America because we were not a bubble city. Las Vegas made a great offer, and I think a couple other cities did too as well. Right. And it worked for the NHL, but unfortunately it was at the cost of presenting hockey games in the United States, which I had a problem with. There's no way to recoup any of that money, obviously, that the American team spent in Canada. That money stays all there with Prime Minister Trudeau and his government, and they get all the benefits of that. But that being said, it sure beat the alternative, which was no hockey at all, or a COVID breakout hockey. So I agree with you, Scott. It was masterful. It did work out well. Unfortunately, it wasn't part of America, but we were here watching it on television, and what turned out to be Doc Emmerich's last year as the voice of, I call him the voice of North American hockey, and an American team won. So quit complaining, Eichorn. Tampa Bay won.
Yeah, well, you're right, George. It was either a flawless bubble in Canada or no hockey champion. You take the champion all day long, deal with it. Rick, some thoughts about the way the NHL handled it?
Oh, they did a great job, and I think what really helped them is that, hockey is really, dominated by Canadians, even though they haven't won a Stanley Cup in a while, but I mean, they have teams in Toronto and Vancouver and all that. And Major League Baseball, they just have Toronto. So, that was a extra advantage for hockey, is that hockey is, a Canadian sport. It's popular here. It's extremely popular in Canada, and they have a lot of teams in Canada. So that really worked out to their advantage. So the other sports, it's just going to be difficult. I mean,
Well, Rick, let me tell you this: don't sell hockey short with the United States nowadays, because I'll tell you what, there's a lot of good young American players that are being produced in the United States. And for many years, it was considered. But when you look at the European players, the Russian players that have come over, and the U.S. hockey, to me, is much better. There's no question about the fact that you have more American players being improved. But I get the conception that you do have hockey as a Canadian sport. But boy, I'll tell you what, it's changed when you look at the talent that's being produced in the States. But I think that when you talk about the bubble per se, in Canada versus the alternative, at least they masterfully pulled it off.
they did.
Let's talk about a bubble that I wasn't sure about, but I have no problem eating crow or being proven wrong once in a while. And the NBA did a masterful job with their bubble in Orlando.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they did. Obviously, Disney World as a major complex and major opportunity presented itself an opportunity for the NBA that they just couldn't walk away from. They did a really good job. Things were really done well. The teams didn't have to travel. They just stayed there. So the competitive balance, I think, was good because, they didn't have to get in and off of airplanes and arrive late at hotels or be delayed by weather, and all that great stuff that goes on with regular NBA travel was avoided. Again, I think the situation was handled very, very well. And, the Lakers emerged as the champions. They did a great job. I think the league did in the playoffs, and, everything worked out really well. So, I mean, what do you think, Rick, about the NBA bubble in Orlando, the home of Mickey Mouse?
They did a great job. I was kind of worried that it was going to be in Florida because the COVID cases have been like skyrocketing like crazy. It's been such a mess over there in Florida. So to have this, to have it in Florida was amazing enough, and and to keep everyone contained in that bubble. And I mean, they did a great job. I was surprised that I thought they were going to have a whole bunch of like cases. I thought like LeBron would test positive, or Anthony Davis, or a lot of these big superstars. And the NBA did a really great job in containing everyone in that bubble at Disney. So that's what I was impressed with.
I think every time I go to Disney's Wide World of Sports in Orlando, I'll have a much different attitude about it now than I ever have, because they had two sufficient arenas to get those games in. And, living only 2.5 hours away off the Florida Turnpike, it's amazing. Now that when you realize how much got done in that bubble, really is amazing. So as much as I've been very critical of the NBA, because I call it the NDL, the National Drama League, and I really have a hard time, I won't even get into that tonight, about the Drama League, the Black Lives Matter. We'll save that for another broadcast, because I know that was a story in 2020. I was impressed with the way the bubble concept not only worked in Orlando, but how well it worked in Orlando, keeping so many teams. And it just goes to show you that the Disney resorts that they have there are just phenomenal, with all those hotels to house all those individuals. And it took a sales job to make sure that everybody followed the protocols and all the security checks that you have with not only visiting media getting in there, but also the way they, Adam Silver and company enforced the whole thing, making sure that they were very, very, they followed them properly. So I'll have a different attitude about the Disney's Wide World of Sports Complex, as they executed it well. And the final bubble I want to talk about is a mini bubble that occurred with MLB, where you had games in both California as well as Texas. Okay, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, that was a good idea. The thing about the COVID, it was how are they going to do with all the traveling, and to have it like in neutral sites, to have the World Series like in Texas. I think it made it really quite interesting, because there's really no home field advantage. It wasn't one for the Dodgers. It wasn't one for for Tampa Bay. It was like them always being on the road. So I thought that was interesting, but it was kind of neat to see that. So maybe that's something they can do sometime in the future, where they can have maybe a World Series like in a neutral site or somewhere instead of and I think it'd be interesting. So we'll see what happens with it. But I think Major League Baseball, I didn't think they were going to have a season. I thought they're going to be shut down, especially with all the outbreaks in Miami and St. Louis, and I thought, oh, they're young people. They're going to go party and they're going to sneak out. Nope. But they regrouped together and got it going. And I think it was very unusual baseball. It was very unorthodox baseball, but we did have a season and we did have a World Series champion.
Well, and, they did it the right way. They put the two America League semifinalists in Southern California at the National League parks, and they put the National League teams in Texas and Dallas-Fort Worth area. Hats off. You did a great job in hosting the World Series. But I disagree, Rick. Baseball belongs in the cities. I don't care if it's a weather-conditioned city in October that they're playing the Fall Classic. I do not want to see baseball go to neutral sites like that. This is a rare exception because of what was happening across America. But I want baseball to be just like the NBA and just like the NHL, and those are played in the home arenas of the teams that deserve to host those games, unlike the Super Bowl, which, of course, is Mr. Super event of the year, and that has to be bid out and played in a neutral site. And I still can't believe after all these 50-plus years, the home team has never got into a Super Bowl. It's just an incredible statistic that I just cannot fathom, that no home team has ever been the host of a Super Bowl city by luck of the draw. But no, I got to disagree with you. I want the World Series right there where the fans deserve it. I go back to my days in Detroit and seeing the 68 and the 84 Tigers and the 2012 and 2016 Tigers and all that excitement at the World Series when it's played at the home ballpark such as Tiger Stadium or Comerica Park.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, both are on target with this. It is highly unusual to see baseball played in a neutral setting. I get that. But it's either that or the alternative, which was none. And then you ended up going to potentially warmer weather climates where you had sufficient facilities to carry the thing off. So, yeah, I think that's a one and done, or maybe not, depending on how this virus plays out again in 21. We don't know yet, but we saw how it worked. Now, George, let me preface you a little bit about no team hosting a Super Bowl. The San Francisco 49ers did win a Super Bowl, but they did it in Stanford Stadium in the area, not in the stadium.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay, thank you, sir.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. Just want to make sure we set the record there and being a Californian guy. But yeah, I mean, I don't think Tom Brady's getting there either. So, but that's for another day. So when we talk about all the champions this year, I personally have never. I don't believe an asterisk should be placed on any championship this year because they had to go through an awful lot to even get them in the first place. No asterisk. I'll lead off on this one. None. No asterisk. Rick, nod your head.
I agree. No asterisk. All I can see is like a little footnote at the bottom saying season shortened due to COVID-19. Other than that, no asterisk. I'm not going to penalize the Dodgers or the Lakers or Tampa Bay or, any other team because of this pandemic that we haven't seen since like 1918.
I wouldn't even put a footnote on it. Leave it alone. I don't even care.
Oh, come on. They're all asterisks. Just come on. 60 games instead of 162 in baseball. Who are you guys kidding?
You.
That's a Dodger asterisk for me right there.
Okay. Well, you're overruled 2-1.
Not in a jury and a judge. I'm not overruled. I have my opinion, sir.
Well, you have your opinion.
We'll take it to Judge Judy.
Jury. You're wrong. Okay. So let's talk about the way things, when we talk about what 2020 is in general, we talk about remote broadcast, George Eichorn. Nobody knows about remote broadcast more than what we had to see with college football. We've seen even ESPN have remote broadcasts with a lot of their shows.
Oh, come on. Put a plexiglass between the two announcers if you have a problem with that.
Well, they are.
I'm not a fan of that. If somebody's sitting in their home in Glendale, Arizona, calling the Michigan Ohio State game and the other guy's in the studios in Bristol, Connecticut. No, those guys should be traveling with the team like they always do. Brandstatter, Deerdorf for U of M football, Dan Miller, Lomas Brown for Detroit Lions football. Put a plexiglass between them so they don't spit on each other, and have them travel. I'm sorry, I don't go along with this remote broadcast stuff.
Well, I didn't say you had to go along with it, okay? I'm just talking about what we saw in 2020. Now,
Yeah.
Now, if you want to sit there and pull out your checkbook and tell me that you're the head of one of these companies and you might be able to scale and save a few dollars, that in many cases we may do some remote. We saw a different angle in broadcasting with remote broadcasting than we ever have. Case in point, NASCAR, okay? Jeff Gordon in one spot, you have Mike Joy in the other. You might start seeing more of a trend of remote broadcasting, but I would think the majority of it should be done, obviously, on site, because you miss out on the interaction with the pregame, with the managers and all that. That's what
Right.
So I think that you still need the hands-on doing it, but under circumstances, I'm wondering whether we might see it more of a trend going forward in some instances where travel and costs become a lot higher. Because let's face the reality, this year everybody's losing money. Rick, I know you're not a broadcaster by trade, but give me your thoughts about remote broadcasting.
Well, I didn't, it is what it is this year. Totally understand. You got to cut the traveling and you had to make everyone safe. It could be something new. It was something different. It was kind of neat to see kind of someone in their own living room doing the game. But at the same time, I agree with George. You have to be there. Yet it's the feel of the game. It's kind of hard to get into it when you're sitting in your home, in your nice warm home with the heater on, and doing a game in Buffalo where it's like 30 below. So, I get it because they had to make it safe, because like I said, we're going through a pandemic we haven't seen since 1918. But there's no good feeling about being right there, the center of the game, watching it and have that feel of the game. But to have the remote, I didn't have a problem with it because that's all they can do right now at this time. But it could be something that, maybe someone couldn't be there because his flight got delayed, or maybe he was sick. They can have him via satellite doing the game.
Yeah, I think there might be remote broadcasting in certain instances going forward. You may have the four major sports and maybe NASCAR or whatever auto racing, but don't be surprised on some of these lesser college games or other sports that you might see it more often to cut down on expenses. But you definitely have to have them there face to face in order to get the full benefit. And I'm going to end it on one note, okay? And this is why I'm doing it. Having worked with the Miami Marlins my first year, that thing called Zoom. Let me tell you guys, Zoom is here to stay. And if it weren't for Zoom, we wouldn't be doing this broadcast the way we're doing it. I tell you, I didn't know what it was before unless I did some zooming on the roads or the interstates. But Zoom got a brand new meaning for me all year, between networking meetings as well as being able to do these broadcasts with a medium here, Zoom, which is very fledgling. As much as I struggled with it earlier, Zoom has become my best friend outside of my significant other.
Yeah, it has. It has helped us out tremendously this year. That company, I can only imagine how their stock has risen. And you're right, Scott. It's a whole new dimension for sports writers and sports broadcasters. The press conferences that you all have sat in with Don Mattingly, and the stuff that's been offered to me here in Detroit with our pro teams. It's tremendous how things have changed. Even athletes interviewed after games now, done via Zoom, so they're not in contact with the media, sitting right a few feet in front of them or behind them, whatever the case may be. So, it's been an interesting change for those of us covering sports, and you're right. I mean, it could very well be something that we see a lot more in the future, because it is convenient and it does work to its advantage. Instead of you and me traipsing out to the practice facility or tracing out to the press conferences and the post games and all that, we can just do it by Zoom and get our stories written and our reports done. So it's transformed in a way the sports reporting industry.
Well, not only that, what about broadcasting? Our job now you have the creation of YouTube channels, which are going to be a lot higher. You got so a lot of people in our industry now have a YouTube channel, which we'll get to in a moment on my end. But you have different ways of visually inviting guests on that you never had before. Everything was strictly audio. Now it's just a totally different animal between streaming, which we're going to be doing a lot next year. So, the Zoom is definitely here to stay. And I'll tell you what, when you learn about it and you get to use it, it's an incredible tool without a doubt. And I have no problem with it. I really enjoyed it. And for me, it's been nothing but positive because my first dive into it from a professional sports standpoint has been with the Miami Marlins and working with Don Mattingly, who I think has been a tremendous joy to work with. And I look forward to getting involved with more and more calls and with all the different sports out there. So Zoom is here to stay.
Yes, it is.
Not only from a broadcasting standpoint, but the way the media does business with PR departments. And Rick, obviously, you were one of the last ones that got involved with the Zoom part from our standpoint because we were working it in, and now we understand how efficient it really is. So, Rick, some thoughts about Zoom before we wrap up the broadcast.
Zoom has been great. I knew nothing about it. I had someone that was familiar with it, and they'll say they send you an invitation, you press it, and you just talk to them. And it's sort of like, when you watch talk shows and they have people on one little screen and one other person on another screen. That's pretty much what it is. You're just talking to each other through a computer, and we talked about all these people who are struggling during COVID-19. Zoom's not. I think they have done very, very well in 2020. So their stock has risen a lot, and they're becoming a household name now, and everyone's been using it, and it's been nice to learn something new now.
Yeah, I got to say this too. Well, I've gotten to use it with the Marlins and a lot of networking things. I do want to give a special shout out to Rudy Reyes, who, when I was doing some stuff with him earlier in the year, got me involved with Zoom when we were doing our shows, and he walked me through and showed me how to do it. God bless Rudy. He's taught me a lot in this business anyhow, especially from the way we do broadcasting these days. But when I ended up figuring out one or two of his, and I got interested in it, and then Candy started figuring out the technical side, I haven't looked back since. It's been an incredible addition for sure. So great broadcast, guys. I think we really tried to do the best we can to summarize 2020 in the best way we can. Now, just a little something to look ahead for us. And about a couple of weeks from now, we're going to do a special broadcast on Sports Desk. I think that this subject warrants a single broadcast, and so we'll put that out there and promote it when necessary. So that'll be our year-end special with George and I and Rick. So meanwhile, Rick, why don't you go ahead and promote everything you stand for? George Eichorn will do the same, and then I'll wrap it up. And, of course, before we go off the air, Rick will give the COVID message. All right, Rick, lead it off.
You can contact me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. My email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB and Charlotte Bats Baseball. I'm on Instagram at Charlotte Bats, and I'm also on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Rick Curti, Curti, and you can contact me on any of those social media websites.
And I should point out that Rick Curti does a marvelous job helping the South Florida Tribune out on social media, making sure all of our content gets shared with the proper people. We thank you so much, Rick, for your help in the social media area as well. Go ahead, George.
Yeah. You can reach me at the South Florida Tribune under Motor City Monitor, which is our special drop-down menu that we have, attacking sports issues in Detroit and Michigan. And also my book is out there, Detroit Sports Media on the Air. For about $20, you can get a nice history book, walk down history and memory lane for Detroit sports broadcasting history, including Ernie Harwell, Ray Lane, Van Patrick, Frank Beckman, Jim Brandstatter, Ken Daniels, and many, many more. And of course, Scott Morganroth, our host here, is in the book as well. And Scott, you got a great picture in there too. I appreciate that. Your contributions to Detroit sports broadcasting as well, my friend.
Well, and those pictures consist of Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Connors, as much as I'm not a tennis fan. Jimmy Connors, that was a good opportunity to meet up with Jimmy back in the day in South Florida many years ago. All right, in terms of social media is concerned, as far as we're concerned, on Twitter, you can follow us at Tribune South. That's the @ Tribune South. Feel free to follow us there. Facebook and Instagram, follow us on South Florida Tribune. YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. It's an easy, go to youtube.com, subscribe, boom, you're all set. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. Guess what, folks? We've created a drop-down box under broadcast. All of our broadcasts are on the website, www.southfloridatribune.com. That's where you'll find all of our broadcasts. We also have columns from our media distribution partners. We have columnists. George alluded to the Motor City Monitor. And we have a lot of different news sites as well, weather and so forth. So it's a very complete website. And our web designer, Candy Ebling, Morgan Roth, does a phenomenal job keeping it all together. Without her, we wouldn't be able to have the operation we have. So our thanks to Candy, who does a marvelous job with it. You can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. I can connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. If you want to hear the audio version of the broadcast, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So, folks, these are just the 5 major ones, but wherever you get your podcasts, you can go out there and do it. I tell you what, I've really enjoyed working with you two guys tonight. I know that we are on to something, and I'm looking forward to building this and taking this into 2021. However, we have a great finale when we honor a lot of the legends who passed away, and I will send a special shout out to my mother, Shyla Morganroth, who died on November 28th over 2020 on Thanksgiving weekend. And I would be foolish not to point out that we lost a very important part of our family on December 4th, 2020, David Levin. I miss David very much. He's been on a lot of these broadcasts with us. You know, we did a lot of stuff together with the Tribune as well as on the broadcast. He taught me a lot of things in terms of how to deal with, you know, the Miami Marlins, the Jaguars, and just so many different journalistic things. So David Levin, you'll always be a part of our family. He has written some stuff for the South Florida Tribune. We will never, ever remove David Levin's drop down. He will always be a part of the South Florida Tribune family forever. So David, rest in peace, and we thank you for all the contributions that you made. All right, Rick, why don't you go out there, and George, you want to say something?
No, I'm just going to give peace sign to Mr. Levin, and peace sign to your dear mother. God bless them both.
Thank you. All right, Rick, I want you to go ahead. And nobody does it better than you in terms of the COVID message. The floor is yours, Rick.
Well, right now, things are not getting any better, but we do have this vaccine and people are getting vaccinated, and that's a good thing. So we're heading in the right direction, but deaths have gone up. Hospitals are jam-packed now, and we need to do our part. We just need to mask up. We need to social distance. People just need to stop being foolish. People are mad at our governors, or mad at my governor here in North Carolina. And bar owners are upset, and I totally get it. But we need to stop the crowding of the places. We need to stop, putting people's lives at risk. Wear a mask, social distance. We just got to hunker down for a little bit. 2020 has been awful. I've written it off, and I pretty much just stay home. But just wear a mask, be safe, social distance. And not only are you wearing a mask to protect yourself, but you're wearing a mask to protect others as well. So just mask up, be safe, and just use some common sense and just avoid big crowds.
That's why you say it. Instead of me, you can do it so well, Rick. Appreciate it. So, meanwhile, guys, phenomenal show. Look forward to our year-ender in a couple of weeks, the night before my birthday, number 58. But meanwhile, on behalf of my two incredible co-hosts, Rick Curti and George Eichorn, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange, and we will see you in about 2 weeks. Take care, everybody. Be safe. And you know what? For that matter, Merry Christmas, everybody, because we will be back on together after Christmas. Good night, everybody. God bless, and once again, be safe.
Happy Hanukkah.
That too. Thank you.